In a world where mental health challenges are more common than ever, the struggle to overcome depression can feel overwhelming. You've probably heard that it's a battle, but what if I told you it's a battle you can win? Imagine waking up one day and feeling the weight that's been pressing down on your chest finally lift. It's not about quick fixes or unrealistic promises, it's about real strategies that work, about understanding that depression doesn't have to define you. This isn't just another story, it's a blueprint for how to beat depression, drawn from real experiences and practical insights. We'll dive deep into the journey of someone just like you, someone who faced the darkness and found a way through. You'll learn about the tools, the mindset shifts, and the natural remedies that made a difference. If you've ever wondered whether it's possible to reclaim your life, to fight depression and win, you're about to find out. In a quiet suburb where every house looked almost identical, lived a man named Jack Thompson. Jack was the kind of guy who blended into the background, a 45-year-old, average build, always with a slight smile on his face. He had a job in sales, nothing too glamorous, but it paid the bills. Jack's routine was as predictable as the sunrise. Every morning he'd brew a cup of coffee, scroll through the news on his phone, and head off to work in his beat-up sedan. His life was simple, almost too simple, and he was okay with that. Or at least that's what he told himself. Jack wasn't the type to openly talk about his feelings, even with close friends. Sure, he had a few buddies from work and they'd occasionally grab a drink together, but the conversations rarely went beyond surface-level banter. On weekends, Jack would catch up on chores, maybe watch a game on TV, and that was that. Yet, despite the steady rhythm of his life, there was an undercurrent of unease that Jack couldn't quite shake off. It wasn't that he was unhappy, but something was missing. The spark, the zest for life, it had all dimmed over the years, leaving Jack feeling somewhat hollow, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. His evenings were particularly quiet. After dinner, Jack would sit in his favorite armchair, flipping through channels, not really watching anything. His mind would wander, sometimes to the past, sometimes to what could have been. It was during these moments that the weight of his unspoken thoughts would settle in, a heaviness that made him feel distant even from himself. He began to wonder, is this it? Is this all life has to offer? Those thoughts would swirl in his head, but he'd push them aside, telling himself that he was just tired, that he'd feel better tomorrow. But tomorrow would come and the feelings lingered. Jack had always prided himself on being resilient, never one to complain or seek help. He'd grown up believing that a man handles his problems on his own, without burdening others. And so, he did just that. But as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Jack started to feel the slow, creeping presence of something darker. It wasn't just a bad mood anymore, it felt like a cloud that followed him everywhere, dulling the colors of life. Little did Jack know this was just the beginning of his journey into a world where he'd have to learn how to beat depression, a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself. One chilly autumn morning, Jack found himself staring blankly at his computer screen at work. The numbers and charts that used to make sense were now a jumble of confusion. It was as if his mind had decided to check out, leaving him in a fog. He shook his head, trying to clear it, but the heaviness in his chest wouldn't budge. That familiar feeling of unease had transformed into something more sinister, something Jack couldn't ignore anymore. The thoughts he had pushed aside for so long were now louder, more persistent, gnawing at his sense of normalcy. The real tipping point came one evening when Jack realized he hadn't laughed, truly laughed, in months. He couldn't remember the last time he felt genuinely happy, or even content. He would go through the motions of life, but it was like living behind a glass wall, separated from everything that once brought him joy. The weight on his shoulders grew heavier each day, making even the simplest tasks feel monumental. Jack began to withdraw not just from others but from himself. The man who once enjoyed a good joke, who found comfort in routine, was now a shadow of who he used to be. Jack didn't want to admit it, but he knew deep down that this wasn't something he could just shake off. The more he tried to ignore it, the more it consumed him. The anxiety was no longer a fleeting feeling. It was a constant companion, whispering doubts and fears into his ear. He started to question everything: his job, his relationships, his very purpose. The vibrant colors of his life had turned into dull shades of gray. Jack was facing a problem he had never anticipated: depression. And it was clear that his usual coping mechanisms, working harder, keeping busy, weren't going to cut it this time. It wasn't just about feeling down. This was something deeper, more insidious. Jack felt like he was slowly losing himself, piece by piece. His mind, once sharp and focused, was now clouded with negativity and self-doubt. The world around him, once full of possibilities, now seemed like a maze with no way out. Jack knew he was standing on the edge of something dangerous, something that could consume him if he didn't find a way to fight back. The question now wasn't just about how to beat depression, it was about whether he even had the strength to try. As Jack sank deeper into his struggles, he found himself one evening sitting alone on a park bench, staring at the falling leaves. The vibrant reds and oranges should have been beautiful, but all he could feel was a sense of numbness. Out of nowhere, an old man with a warm smile sat beside him. His eyes twinkled with a wisdom that only comes with age, and there was something comforting about his presence. Without being asked, the man started speaking as if he knew exactly what Jack needed to hear. "You know," the old man began, "there's a way out of that fog you're in. I've been there myself years ago. Felt like the world had lost all its color, like I was walking through life in black and white." Jack was taken aback by the man's words. How could he know? But there was something in his voice, a calm assurance that made Jack want to listen. The old man continued, "You can't fight depression alone. It's not about being strong or tough, it's about knowing when to ask for help. Sometimes, the best way to overcome depression is to lean on someone who's been through it." The conversation flowed effortlessly, and for the first time in months, Jack felt a glimmer of hope. The old man spoke of natural depression remedies, things that had helped him. He mentioned simple yet powerful strategies, like practicing mindfulness, which could be as easy as taking a few minutes each day to breathe deeply and focus on the present moment. He also talked about the importance of connecting with others, even when it feels easier to isolate. "Depression thrives in darkness, Jack," he said softly. "But when you bring it into the light, when you share it with others, it loses some of its power." Before leaving, the old man handed Jack a small, worn book. "This helped me when I needed it most," he said. The title read, "The Power of Positive Thinking" by Norman Vincent Peale. "Remember, Jack," the old man added, "you don't have to fight this battle alone. There's a whole world of mental health support out there, but you've got to take the first step." As he walked away, Jack felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of direction. He realized that finding help wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the first real step in learning how to beat depression. The old man's words lingered in Jack's mind for days, echoing in the quiet moments when he was alone with his thoughts. Jack knew he had to do something different, something that would shake him out of the fog that had settled over his life. But the idea of stepping out of his routine, of reaching out for help, was terrifying. He had always been self-reliant, proud of handling things on his own. Admitting he needed help felt like stepping into the unknown, a place where there were no guarantees, only risks. One afternoon, Jack received an unexpected email from a colleague, inviting him to a local support group for those struggling with mental health. His first instinct was to delete it, but something stopped him. The words of the old man replayed in his head, "You've got to take the first step." Jack hesitated, his finger hovering over the delete button, but then he took a deep breath and opened the email instead. The group met every Thursday evening, not far from his office. It was out of his comfort zone, but Jack knew he couldn't keep doing the same thing and expect different results. The day of the first meeting, Jack almost backed out. As he walked towards the community center, his heart pounded, and his hands felt clammy. Every part of him wanted to turn around and go home, back to the safety of his familiar routine. But he kept walking one step at a time, driven by the small hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something better. When he arrived, the room was filled with people from all walks of life. Young, old, men, women, all of them gathered for the same reason. They were all there to fight their own battles, and somehow, knowing he wasn't alone gave Jack the strength to stay. As the meeting began, Jack listened as others shared their stories, stories of struggle, of setbacks, but also of triumphs and victories over depression. For the first time, Jack felt a connection, a sense of belonging. These were people who understood, who didn't judge, who were there to support each other. By the end of the evening, Jack realized that he had crossed a threshold. He was no longer alone in his fight. He had taken the first step out of the darkness and into a new world, one where he wasn't just surviving, but starting to figure out how to fight depression and reclaim his life. As Jack settled into this new chapter of his life, he quickly realized that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Each week, he attended the support group, listening and occasionally sharing, but the real battles happened in the quiet moments between meetings. Depression didn't just vanish because he was seeking help. It lingered, testing his resolve at every turn. There were days when getting out of bed felt like a monumental task, when the weight of his thoughts threatened to pull him back into the darkness. But Jack was determined. He had made a promise to himself to keep pushing forward, no matter how hard it got. Jack also started to implement some of the mental health strategies he had learned, both from the group and from the book the old man had given him. He began practicing mindfulness daily, even if just for a few minutes, focusing on his breath, grounding himself in the present. Some days it felt like nothing more than a drop in the ocean, but other days, it was the lifeline he needed to pull himself out of a downward spiral. He also made a conscious effort to reach out to old friends, to reconnect with people he had distanced himself from over the years. These small acts of connection reminded him that he wasn't alone, that there were people who cared about him, even if he had forgotten that for a while. But the road wasn't without its obstacles. Jack faced moments of intense self-doubt, where the old voices in his head told him he wasn't worth the effort, that he was destined to fail. These moments were like facing an invisible enemy, one that knew all his weaknesses and insecurities. Yet for every setback, Jack found a way to keep going. He'd recall the stories shared in the group, the battles others had faced, and how they had come out stronger on the other side. He clung to the belief that he too could overcome depression, even if it meant taking it one day at a time, one step at a time. Through these challenges, Jack also discovered unexpected allies. There was Sarah, a fellow group member who had been battling depression for years. She became a friend and a source of inspiration, always reminding Jack to be kind to himself, to celebrate even the smallest victories. And there was his sister, who, upon learning about his struggles, became a constant support, checking in on him regularly. These relationships became pillars in Jack's life, giving him the strength to face each new day. The journey was far from over, but Jack was slowly building the tools and support he needed to keep moving forward, to fight depression with everything he had. As the weeks turned into months, Jack found himself standing at the edge of a significant turning point. He had faced numerous challenges along the way, each one chipping away at the fortress of depression that had held him captive. But now he was approaching what felt like the final battle, the moment when everything he had learned and endured would be put to the test. The group sessions, the mindfulness practices, the reconnections with friends and family had all built up to this. Confronting the root of his depression, the fears and insecurities that had been festering for years. Jack knew that this wouldn't be a physical battle but a mental and emotional one. It was about facing the darkest parts of himself, the thoughts he had tried to bury, the pain he had ignored. He started preparing for this confrontation in earnest. He dove deeper into the practices that had helped him, refining his techniques for coping with depression. Jack began journaling regularly, a practice suggested by Sarah, where he could pour out his thoughts and feelings without judgment. Writing became a way for him to organize the chaos in his mind, to see his struggles laid out in front of him, and to confront them head-on. In addition to journaling, Jack revisited the lessons from the book given to him by the old man. He read about the power of positive thinking not as a cure-all, but as a tool to reshape his mindset. He practiced affirmations, telling himself each day that he was capable of overcoming this, that he was stronger than his depression. These weren't just empty words. They were reminders, anchors to hold on to when the waves of doubt threatened to pull him under. Jack also took practical steps to ensure he was physically ready for this challenge, focusing on his diet, exercise, and sleep, elements that often go overlooked in the fight against depression. The night before what he knew would be his hardest day yet, Jack sat quietly in his apartment, reflecting on how far he had come. The old man's words echoed in his mind once more, reminding him that he wasn't alone. Jack knew that the next day he would face his biggest fear, opening up fully in the support group, sharing the darkest parts of his story that he had kept hidden even from himself. It wasn't just about seeking sympathy, it was about releasing the hold that these buried emotions had on him. Jack felt a mixture of fear and resolve, knowing that this confrontation was necessary, that it was the key to truly beating depression and reclaiming his life. The day had finally arrived, and Jack could feel the tension in his body as he walked into the support group meeting. He had prepared himself for this moment, yet nothing could have fully readied him for the emotional weight he was about to confront. As the meeting began, Jack's heart raced and his palms were sweaty. The familiar faces in the room were a source of comfort, but the thought of revealing his deepest struggles, the raw and unfiltered pain he had carried for so long, filled him with dread. When it was Jack's turn to speak, he hesitated. For a moment, he considered staying silent, retreating back into the safety of his mind where no one could reach him. But then he remembered why he was here, why he had pushed himself to this point. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak, his voice trembling at first but growing steadier with each word. Jack shared memories he had locked away, the moments of despair that had nearly broken him. He spoke of the hopelessness that had clung to him like a shadow and the times when he had doubted whether life was worth living. As Jack spoke, he felt a shift within himself. The emotions he had kept hidden for so long began to surface, overwhelming him with their intensity. The room seemed to close in around him as if the walls themselves were pressing down. Jack's voice faltered, and for a moment, it felt like the darkness was winning, like he was sinking back into the abyss he had fought so hard to escape. But then, something unexpected happened. One by one, the members of the group began to speak up, offering words of support, encouragement, and understanding. They shared their own experiences, creating a web of connection that lifted Jack from the depths of his despair. Despite the support, this was still the hardest moment of Jack's journey. He had laid himself bare, exposed the deepest wounds of his soul, and now he had to confront the aftermath. For a brief moment, Jack felt as though he had made a mistake, that opening up had only made the pain worse. But as the meeting came to a close and he saw the understanding and compassion in the eyes of those around him, Jack realized that this was his symbolic death. He had faced the darkest part of himself and survived. It was the breaking point he needed to move forward, to rebuild himself stronger than before. That night, Jack went home feeling utterly drained, as if he had fought a battle that had left him battered and bruised. But beneath the exhaustion was a sense of relief, of having finally confronted the monster that had lurked in the shadows of his mind. He knew the journey wasn't over, that there were still battles ahead, but he had faced the greatest challenge and come out the other side. Now it was time to rebuild, to claim the reward that lay beyond the crisis. In the days following his breakthrough at the support group, Jack began to notice subtle but significant changes in himself. The darkness that had once consumed him felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. It wasn't that his depression had suddenly vanished, but the grip it held on his life was weakening. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jack experienced moments of genuine peace, fleeting perhaps but real. This was the treasure he had been seeking, the reward for his courage to face his deepest fears and vulnerabilities. Jack's newfound sense of peace wasn't the only reward. He discovered a strength within himself that he hadn't known existed. The experience of confronting his depression head-on had unlocked a resilience that had been buried beneath years of pain. He realized that he was not defined by his struggles, but by how he chose to respond to them. This shift in perspective was empowering. It gave Jack the confidence to start making more proactive changes in his life. He began setting small goals, things like going for a walk every morning, spending time with friends, or practicing gratitude daily. These were the building blocks of his recovery, and each small victory reinforced his belief that he was on the right path. In addition to personal growth, Jack also found a deeper connection with those around him. The bonds he had formed in the support group, especially with Sarah, became a source of ongoing encouragement and support. Jack also reconnected with his sister on a new level, sharing with her the details of his journey. This openness not only strengthened their relationship but also provided Jack with a sense of accountability, a reminder that he wasn't in this fight alone. The relationships that had once felt distant now felt like lifelines, anchoring him as he continued to navigate his recovery. But perhaps the most valuable reward of all was the knowledge and insight Jack gained from his experience. He had learned firsthand that beating depression was not about a single miraculous event, but about the accumulation of small, consistent efforts over time. He understood the importance of mental health strategies, of seeking help, and of staying committed to the journey, even when it seemed impossible. Jack realized that his story, once a tale of despair, was now one of hope and resilience, a story that could inspire others facing similar battles. This realization filled him with a sense of purpose, a desire to share what he had learned and to help others find their way out of the darkness. As Jack continued to move forward, the pieces of his life began to fall into place. The conflict that had once dominated his every waking moment was now a chapter he could look back on with a sense of accomplishment. The shadows of depression, while still present at times, no longer had the power to control him. Jack had learned how to navigate them, using the tools and strategies he had gathered along his journey. The support group meetings became less about survival and more about maintaining the progress he had made, sharing his story with newcomers who were just beginning their own battles. Jack also started to see the ripple effects of his transformation in other areas of his life. His work, which had once been a source of stress and frustration, became more manageable as he applied the same mindfulness and mental health tips that had helped him overcome depression. He found that he was more focused, more productive, and most importantly, more at peace with himself. Jack's relationships continued to deepen, not just with his sister and Sarah, but with others in his life as well. People noticed the change in him, the calm confidence, the genuine smile, and it drew them closer. The resolution of secondary conflicts became evident as Jack embraced his new reality. His once strained relationships were mended, and the distance he had created between himself and the world began to close. Jack was no longer merely surviving. He was living, fully engaged with life. He found joy in simple things like cooking a meal or taking a walk in the park, things he had once taken for granted or been too overwhelmed to enjoy. These moments of clarity and contentment were the true markers of his progress, the signs that he had indeed overcome the darkest part of his journey. As Jack reflected on his transformation, he felt a strong desire to give back, to help others who were struggling as he once had. He started volunteering at a local mental health clinic, sharing his experiences and offering support to those in need. Jack's journey had come full circle, from a man trapped in the grips of depression to someone who could guide others out of the same darkness. The challenges he had faced were not in vain. They had shaped him into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. The man who had once been lost had found his way, and in doing so, discovered a purpose that would carry him forward. After what felt like a lifetime of trials and tribulations, Jack finally found himself returning to the life he had known before depression took hold. But this time, everything was different. The streets of his neighborhood, the familiar faces at work, the routine of daily life, all of it seemed both new and deeply familiar. Jack had come full circle, but he was no longer the same person who had begun this journey. He was stronger, more self-assured, and equipped with a profound understanding of himself and the challenges he had faced. The return to his normal life wasn't without its challenges. There were still moments of doubt, flashes of the old fears that once held him back. But Jack now had the tools to manage these moments, to prevent them from spiraling into something more. He continued to practice the strategies he had learned: mindfulness, journaling, and regular exercise, ensuring that he remained vigilant in his self-care. The people around him, especially those who had supported him through his darkest times, noticed the change. Jack was more present, more engaged, and more at peace with himself. The small victories that had once seemed impossible were now a part of his everyday life. As Jack reintegrated into his old world, he found that his perspective had shifted. The problems that had once seemed insurmountable were now manageable. The stressors that had once overwhelmed him now felt like opportunities for growth. He approached life with a newfound sense of gratitude, appreciating the little things that had once gone unnoticed. Jack's return to his routine wasn't a retreat into the past, but rather a step forward into a future he had earned through hard work and perseverance. Jack's journey had also equipped him with a sense of purpose. He felt a calling to share his experiences, to help others who were still in the throes of depression. He began writing about his journey, creating blog posts, and speaking at local events. His story, once a source of shame, became a beacon of hope for others. Jack knew that his return to the world wasn't just about reclaiming his life, but about using his experiences to make a difference in the lives of others. His world may have looked the same, but Jack knew that he had been forever changed by the journey he had undertaken. With time, Jack's transformation became more evident, not just to himself but to everyone around him. The once distant and withdrawn man was now an engaged, vibrant individual who had embraced life with a renewed sense of purpose. His experiences had sculpted him into someone who not only understood the depths of depression but had also discovered how to navigate and rise above it. Jack had internalized the lessons he had learned, and they had become a fundamental part of who he was. Jack's daily life now reflected his new mindset. He approached each day with a sense of gratitude and curiosity, embracing opportunities for growth and connection. He continued to practice the mental health strategies that had become second nature to him, using them to manage stress and maintain balance. His relationships were stronger and more meaningful, grounded in the authenticity and openness he had developed. Jack no longer saw obstacles as insurmountable barriers but as opportunities to apply the resilience he had cultivated through his journey. In his professional life, Jack began to thrive in ways he hadn't before. His newfound confidence and clarity enabled him to tackle challenges with a fresh perspective. He took on leadership roles, mentored colleagues, and approached projects with creativity and enthusiasm. Jack's transformation wasn't limited to his personal growth. It had ripple effects that enhanced every aspect of his life. The skills he had honed in overcoming depression now served him well in navigating the complexities of his career. Perhaps most importantly, Jack's transformation had given him a profound sense of purpose. His volunteer work and writing had become integral parts of his life, allowing him to use his experiences to inspire and support others. Jack found fulfillment in knowing that his journey could help others find their way through their own struggles. The person he had become was a testament to the power of perseverance and self-discovery, and he carried that with him as he continued to live out his life with intention and hope. Jack had come full circle, but the life he returned to was far from the one he had known before. The old routines were still there, the morning coffee, the commute to work, the evenings spent at home, but everything felt enriched, deepened by the journey he had undergone. The man who once struggled to get out of bed in the morning was now someone who greeted each day with a sense of purpose and direction. His experiences had transformed him, and although the world around him looked the same, Jack knew that nothing would ever be quite as it was before. His return to this normal life was marked by a profound understanding of what it meant to truly live. Jack had learned that life was not just about surviving the day-to-day but about finding joy in the small moments, about connecting with others in meaningful ways, and about pursuing a path that aligned with his deeper sense of self. The struggles he had faced were no longer weights holding him down. They were the foundation upon which he had built his new life. Jack had come to see these challenges not as something to be feared but as catalysts for growth. As he settled into this renewed life, Jack began to realize the power of his journey. The lessons he had learned about how to beat depression, how to fight and overcome the darkness, were now tools he could use to help others. His story, once a personal battle, became a source of strength and inspiration for those who were still struggling. Jack was no longer just a survivor. He was a guide, a mentor, someone who could light the way for others. This was the ultimate reward of his journey, the ability to give back, to be a beacon of hope for others who were where he had once been. Jack's life was now a testament to the idea that transformation is possible, that even in the darkest moments, there is a way forward. The man who had once been lost in the depths of depression was now a pillar of strength and resilience, ready to face whatever came next with confidence and grace. His new normal was not just a return to what was, but a step into what could be, a life lived with intention, filled with purpose, and open to the endless possibilities that lay ahead. Before you go, I want you to ask yourself, what if everything you've read could change your life? What if, starting today, you decided to apply these lessons and take that first step toward beating depression? You've seen how Jack did it. He took control, fought back, and transformed his life. And now it's your turn. The strategies and insights shared here aren't just stories. They're real, actionable steps you can take right now. So what's stopping you? Start small if you need to, but start today. Whether it's trying a new mental health tip, reaching out for support, or embracing a natural remedy, every step counts. And don't forget, this is just the beginning. The journey of beating depression is ongoing, but you don't have to do it alone. Stay connected, stay informed, and keep pushing forward. If this story resonated with you, if you found value in these insights, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. This way you'll never miss an update as we continue to explore how to live a healthier, happier life. Your journey is just beginning, and we're here to help every step of the way.